So, as most of you know by now, the United States just opened up its embassy in Jerusalem, and for oligarchs who are in support of Israel's rogue, right-wing, international, law-violating criminal government, well, they were ecstatic. Trump's daughter and son-in-law took selfies with Israel's war criminal Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu. President Donald Trump took to Twitter to congratulate Israel, and as Treasury Secretary Steve Mnuchin and Ivanka Trump revealed the official seal of the U.S. Embassy, a small crowd, including Israeli hardliners and right-wing billionaires like Sheldon Adelson, cheered on the embassy's opening.
On behalf of the 45th President of the United States of America, we welcome you officially and for the first time to the Embassy of the United States here in Jerusalem, the capital of Israel. Thank you.
Now, while those oligarchs were celebrating, a mere 50 miles away from Jerusalem in Gaza, protests broke out, as was expected, but they've also been protesting for the past 6 weeks. And as usual, Israel chose to not hold back, and once again, they brutalized protesters. So as the Chicago Tribune reports, Israeli forces shot and killed 57 Palestinians and injured more than 2,700 during mass protests Monday along the Gaza border, while just a few miles away, Israel and the U.S. held a festive inauguration ceremony for the new American embassy in contested Jerusalem. In addition, a baby died from tear gas inhalation, the Gaza Health Ministry said, bringing the overall death toll to 58. Now, when right-wingers hear about this news, they'll say, well, look, this was warranted because there were protesters who were throwing rocks at the IDF, and also some of them might have even had Molotov cocktails. But ask yourself this. Was Israel's response proportional? Do you really believe that? Because if you are a rational thinking person, then I don't know how you can make that assumption, seeing that Israel's military was literally using sniper rifles to mow down protesters. And additionally, as this next video will demonstrate, they used drones to distribute tear gas around the protests. Now, as tear gas rained down on them, they were using tennis rackets to defend themselves and to swat it away. But I actually want to get back to the celebration because while Israel was murdering Palestinian protesters, well, back at this celebration, Jared Kushner actually had the audacity to claim how Israel was committed to, quote, freedom.
Israel proves every day the boundless power of freedom. This land is the only land in the Middle East in which Jews, Muslims, and Christians, and people of all faiths participate and worship freely according to their beliefs. Israel protects women's rights, freedom of speech, and the right of every individual to reach their God-given potential.
See, we have to stand up for Israel because they're the only country in the Middle East that's actually committed to freedom. Now, I know what you're thinking. How can we claim with a straight face that they're committed to freedom as they mow down protesters? Well, you see, if you ask the White House, specifically according to White House Deputy Press Secretary Raj Shah, he'll tell you that it wasn't Israel's fault after all. In fact, Hamas is the one responsible for Israel killing more than 50 peaceful Palestinian protesters.
Jared Kushner in his speech pointed a finger at the Palestinians saying they were responsible for provoking violence. But given the fact that it's only Palestinians who are being killed, should Israel not shoulder some of the blame?
Well, as I said earlier, we believe Hamas bears the responsibility. Look, this is a propaganda attempt. I mean, this is a gruesome and unfortunate propaganda attempt. I think the Israeli government has spent weeks trying to handle this without violence. And we find it very unfortunate.
Throwing rocks 50 meters from the wall, and we're faced with sniper attack. I mean, is the White House in denial of the split-screen reality that's occurring?
Again, we believe that Hamas is responsible for this flake.
So in other words, don't believe your lying eyes, ignore all the video evidence you saw of the IDF brutalizing peaceful Palestinian protesters, because if you, in fact, accept what's the reality of the situation, well then, you're getting duped by Hamas propaganda. Congratulations, dummy. I mean, they're saying this with a straight face, and really, this is an insult to our intelligence. They're literally rewriting history before our very eyes, and it's absolutely absurd. Their stance has consistently been Anytime Israel does anything wrong, blame Hamas no matter what. There's no room for nuance whatsoever, and this administration is doing nothing to hide their blatant lies that they're telling Americans on behalf of Israel's right-wing criminal government. Now, thankfully, there is an opposition party that can theoretically speak out against the White House's lies. However, if you were expecting the so-called Democratic Party resistance to come to the rescue here, well, then you shouldn't hold your breath, because Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer actually released a statement in support of Donald Trump's decision to move the U.S. Embassy from Tel Aviv to Israel. He said absolutely nothing about Israel's brutalization of Palestinian protesters, but he called Donald Trump's move here long overdue. And other prominent Senate Democrats that are eyeing a 2020 presidential run, like Kamala Harris, Kirsten Gillibrand, Cory Booker, even Elizabeth Warren, they had nothing to say about this. Nothing whatsoever. So if the opposition party failed us here, and they're not actually effectively standing up to this false narrative that Donald Trump's White House is putting out, well then of course the media is going to be our backup, right? Well, actually, not necessarily, because much like Democrats, media is averse from covering this in a fair and balanced way. They don't want to say anything that could potentially ever offend Israel. So what did they do? Well, they covered this using headlines so laughably vague, you could tell that they were just apprehensive about publishing anything that would portray Israel in a negative light, even if Israel is obviously guilty here. But once basically everyone made fun of the New York Times here, well, we essentially forced their hand and made them give the article the objective headline it deserved in the first place. So by and large, to summarize the situation, we opened an embassy in Jerusalem for Israel and those opposed to it who exercised their right to free speech. They were murdered, and essentially nobody with power or influence had much to say about it. That is the state of American politics. They will lie to our faces, tell us to not believe what we see, and nobody seems outraged about it. So I actually do want to share with you a clip of a rare moment that we saw on the mainstream cable news shows where an MSNBC host had a genuine human reaction to this.
It's important that the foreign policy is generating uncertainty, deep uncertainty, right? That it's cascading chaos on the
But the foreign policy is not what the Congress members of the House and Senate are campaigning on right now. They need to campaign on domestic issues where they have a stance. So while Donald Trump is doing this and may look for a deflection, it's not necessarily going to help the midterms.
All of that's important, and all of those babies are dead. All of those people are dead. They're dead. And we're talking about racehorses. I mean, the politics. I mean, there are a lot of folks who are dead today. For what? I'm sorry. This is me being a moralist, I suppose.
No, I understand. And the White House today, their response to that was it is Hamas's fault, and they're using them as tools for propaganda.
That's like saying the children in the Children's March of Birmingham, it was their fault that Bull Connor attacked them.
That was probably the most poignant point I've seen made about this anywhere. Kudos to that pundit for actually saying what empathetic, rational thinking human beings feel when they see the IDF mowing down peaceful Palestinian protesters. Now, on top of all of the absurdity of everyone refusing to condemn what Israel did here, well, Donald Trump's administration is still maintaining at least that they're committed to peace. I'm not even kidding about that.
President Trump was very clear that his decision and today's celebration do not reflect a departure from our strong commitment to lasting peace, a peace that overcomes the conflicts of the past in order to give our children a brighter and more boundless future. I believe peace is within reach if we dare to believe that the future can be different from the past.
Trump's administration literally blamed Hamas for Israel's murder of Palestinian protesters, and they have the gall to still preach about peace. It's like we're living in the fucking Twilight Zone. Ask yourself this. Put yourself in the shoes of a Palestinian. If you see the U.S. government defending Israel when they do indefensible things, when they commit crimes against humanity, when you see Donald Trump move their embassy from Tel Aviv to a disputed territory, do you really think that Palestinians feel as though the United States is a neutral arbiter capable of facilitating a fair outcome in the event they ever come to the table and try to come up with a peaceful solution to the conflict? Of course not. They'd be dumb to believe that the U.S. is on their side. The United States is not on the side of Palestine whatsoever. They're on Israel's side, and no matter what Israel does, we still defend them. Now, there's still going to be people who comment and say, well, look, the Molotov cocktails, the rocks. Well, why don't you look at the death count? No Palestinians were, or no Israeli military people were injured. None of them were killed. Nearly 3,000 Palestinians were injured, and almost 60 were killed. Ask yourself, who is in the wrong here? If you still say it's Palestine and Palestinians, you're not a serious person.
Support this podcast by becoming a patron at patreon.com/Humanist Report.